Now I want to bring in Fred's initial demand curve, where he can spend $40 a month. And we're going to pretend like Fred represents the entire national economy, for the sake of this example, to make it easier. At price 25, Fred was willing to buy one paperback book. And by the way, I do feel like I should point out here that if we were to shift, or is that if we wanted to show an increase in supply, and all of these doubled, so 40, 20, 10, it would shift to the right, just as any other economic graph does. And if it decreased, 10, 5, 3, it would go that way. So, we have 1 for 25, and you know what, I should do this in a different color. At price 20, he was willing to buy 2. At price 15, he was willing to buy 2. At price 10, he was willing to buy 4. At price 5, he was willing to buy 8. So, there's your demand curve on top of the supply curve. Now, we can see that there is a point of intersection here, and that point of intersection is very important. That is the equilibrium price and quantity. So, in a world where everything that producers and consumers do makes sense, what's going to happen here with these numbers added in with Fred's demand for paperback books, the book company is going to sell paperback books for, this looks like $13 a piece. And they're going to produce, let's say that's four of them. That is what the supply and demand curve shows us, is that in a sensible economy, with this data that we have looked at here, the price of paperback books would be $13, and the quantity supplied would be 4. So, and now we're going to look at how you would get the profit for the company. You take the price and multiply it by the quantity here, which is the area of this portion of the graph. And this is called total revenue $52. So, if it costs $10 to make each book, and they're making 4 books, the company is spending $40. And then they get 52 back, so their profit is $12. Alright, now let's erase this and look at one more thing before I give you your assignment. What happens when the supply and demand curves shift? I'm going to draw a big graph here to show everything that's going to happen here. We're going to use this example again, but we're going to use a little bit more rounded numbers. Let's say that for the initial one, paperback books are going to cost $15 and they're going to make 4. So, and very rough, supply demand. Total revenue of, answer now, 60. If you said that, you're right. So, let's get a different color here. We're going to look at what happens to demand first. If demand increases, so shifts to the right, the price increases, we see here, to about 18, and the quantity produced increases to 5. So their revenue goes up. If demand decreases, shifts down, the price of paperback books will go down to about 12, and the numbers do not mean anything, just for this example only, and they would produce 3. So that's what happens in shifts of demand curve. When demand increases, price increases, quantity increases. When demand decreases, price decreases, quantity decreases. Now for supply, it's the exact opposite. If supply increases, but demand stays the same, then the quantity produced is going to go up, but the price is going to go down. So it's not the exact opposite, but you get what I mean. When supply increases, price decreases, and quantity supplied increases. When supply decreases, say because it costs more to make something or whatever, price increases, while quantity supplied decreases. So if there's less of it, the price is more because it's worth more. Now, before you start drawing everything out, I want to make something very, very clear. For general statements, and that is what these are, and you can ignore the numbers for now. This is extremely important, so pay very close attention. If supply and demand both increase, quantity does increase. That is certain. However, while price looks like it stays the same, it doesn't. The correct answer to this would be the effect on price is not determinable because you don't have the exact data, because you don't know how much supply increased or how much demand increased. Because if demand didn't increase there and demand increased by a drastic amount, the price is going to go way up and it's not going to stay remotely the same. So that is extremely important. You cannot answer that the way that you think it is when you draw it out. Same thing applies to quantity. When you look at decreases in supply and demand. Well, hold up a second. I have to think about this for a second. Alright. Yeah, it's if one, and we'll say demand increases and supply decreases, price goes up, but quantity, as it appears to stay the same, does not, because again, you don't know how much either of the two indicators increased or decreased. So, the effect on quantity of an increase in one and a decrease in the other is not determinable. And that is the correct answer. It is not, stays the same. Not determinable. Cannot be determined. And that is true for general statements. Now, if you are given exact parameters and you can see quite clearly that one is changed, then you can mark that. But for general statements, which is what you'll be doing on, this is your assignment that I want you to do in your journals to ensure that you've grasped all the information I have taught on supply and demand. I'm going to zoom in on each part since the writing is kind of small. For question 1, draw a demand curve using this data. I'll stay there for just a second. For number 2, draw a supply and demand curve. Show an increase in supply and state its effects on price and quantity. Draw another supply and demand curve, show a decrease in demand and an increase in supply, and state its effects on price and quantity.